accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. And the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness, either there or elsewhere. Then I'll read the 13th Amendment. Section 1. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Thank you, and enjoy the evening.
These texts remind us that emancipation was not an event. It was a process.
Great job, you're a filmmaker.
Thank you, yes.
What's your name again?
Rahman.
Ramon. You're online. Ramon. Great job. That was awesome. This is my 4th year, and I always listen, hear you. Yeah, great job. What type of films have you done? What type of films have you done?
I've done a few short films and 2 feature films. And actually, we're having one of the feature films at the Boston Common.
Oh, really? This summer? Oh, really? Do you have information about that now? Or how can we get in contact? Is there a website?
Yeah, if you can, yeah, I can do that because we're still working on locking down the dates because you know how Boston Common tends to be a little bit.
Yeah.
And as well during the summer, they have a bunch of people there. So yeah, we're still working on it. But this summer, definitely.
This summer. Where are you from?
Nigeria.
Nigeria, of course. Oh God, I've never been to Nigeria, but I know a lot of people, of course, in Boston. That's great. Nice meeting you.
Same here.
Yeah, God bless.
Same
Yeah.
here.
I love your outfit. You look beautiful. What's your name?
Choice.
Joyce. Nice meeting you, Joyce. Great job. Yeah.
Justice was our battle, and how justice was denied. Make them hear you, make them hear you, and say to those who blame us for the way we chose to fight, that sometimes there are battles that are more than black or white. And I could not put down my sword when justice was my right. Make them hear you. Go out and tell our story to your daughters and your sons. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. And tell them in our struggles we were not the only ones. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Your sword could be a sermon, or the power of the pen. Teach every child to raise its voice, and then, my brothers, then will justice be demanded by 10 billion righteous men. Make them hear you. When they hear you, I'll be near you again.
Amazing. We gotta go. Wow. Celebration is happening. We are having fun. I'm
To
excited.
address the theme, Forging Tomorrow Today, Reparation to Restoration,
Reparation to
we have
restoration.
invited Dr. Michael Curry, Esquire. Dr. Curry is Executive Director of the
Hi, how are you? Good.
Prior
Let
to
them
that,
hear you.
he was president
They gotta hear
and
us.
CEO of the Boston chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the nation's oldest civil rights organization. Also a regular commentator on Boston University.
So I see you everywhere, huh? I see you everywhere, right?
We are all eager to hear his thoughts on our program.
Let them hear you.
Please welcome Dr. Curry.
Hi.
I'll be right back. Check out some of the batteries. Is he the guy from the...
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. It's a celebration. I need more response than that. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Can I get everyone's attention in the park right now at the museum? If you are within the sound of my voice, I need your attention just for a few quick moments. If somebody is near you and they're talking, just ask them to pause for a few minutes. So first, I want to thank Jamada Abdulhalik, Mr. Barry Gaither, the Boston Juneteenth Committee, and the National Center for Afro-American Artists, and all the other sponsors, volunteers, and supporters for organizing this Juneteenth celebration. Yeah, please. And a special message to Barry. Thank you for keeping our history alive. Thank you for caring about archiving, preserving, displaying, reconciling our history when too few were willing to reckon with it, when too few were willing to financially support it, and when some, quite frankly, wanted to forget it. But I'm reminded of a Carter G. Woodson quote, the founder of Negro History Week and now what we call Black History Month. He said, "History is not just the mere gathering of facts. The object of historical study is to arrive at a reasonable interpretation of those facts." So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get off the stage.
He's coming over here.
One of my favorite African proverbs is, if you know the beginning well, the end won't trouble you.
Yes.
If you know the beginning well, the end won't trouble you. So I'm gonna share a little bit about my beginning as we talk about Juneteenth and this celebration and the theme. So I am a child of Roxbury. My mother moved here. If anyone's read Warmth of Other Suns, Isabel Wilkerson's book, she moved here from Greensboro, Alabama. Right, 1950s, 1960s, like 6 million other people migrated out of the South and moved into northern cities. My mother was one of those, and moved into a housing project in Boston, Lenox Street Housing Projects. Had me, I was the first child born here in Boston, and I have two sisters, one older, born in Birmingham, and one born here after me about 4 or 5 years later. Now, I share that with you for this reason, that when I was growing up in Boston, I want to tell you what I saw. When I was a kid, latchkey kid, child on welfare, within Lenox Street Housing Projects, when I walked out of my house every day, and I walked through communities like this, I saw many people in my community had cancer. High rates of breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer. When I walked out of my neighborhood, almost all of us as kids had asthma. All my uncles were incarcerated. Some of them were Mau-Maus. Anybody remember what Mau-Maus were? So I grew up with Mau-Maus coming by the projects to pick me up. As the little kid, they would take me to get candy and ice cream. And then many of them were killed by law enforcement or later incarcerated. I grew up in a neighborhood where all of us were poor. Black and Latino, Hispanic, Puerto Rican. I grew up in a neighborhood where a lot of dark secrets we didn't talk about. The fact that people had mental health issues that were not treated was not what we talked about back then. The fact that people took their own lives is something that they didn't talk about in the projects in the 1960s and 70s and 80s and 90s. The fact that we lived and we had a wealth gap, we didn't own anything. We didn't own a car, we didn't own a house, we didn't own anything. So here's what troubled me as I left Roxbury to go to visit family in Birmingham and Tuscaloosa and Greensboro, and I saw the same thing. That people who looked like me were living the same way. And then I go to visit family in the Bronx and in Brooklyn, and they were living the same way. Youngstown, Ohio, Rochester, New York, North Minneapolis, St. Paul, living the same way. So I want to tell you, as I stand here right now, when you're a little kid like some of the little kids in this crowd, and you see that at your family reunion, everybody is desperately sick, dying, they won't make it to the next 2-year reunion, you can't help but to think, what's wrong with us?
Yes.
Because everywhere you turn, we're sick, we're incarcerated, we're dying, we're poor. That doesn't mean that every black person is. It means disproportionately, no matter where you go in this country, we are still living in those conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So as we think about Juneteenth today, I want to tell you what, if you know the beginning well, the end won't trouble you. I came back from college, decided that I wanted to be involved in the movement.
Yes.
So right now, as I stand here, I always say, I'm glad so many people are woke and others are waking up, but some of us are insomniacs. There's a lot of insomniacs out here today.
Oh, yes. I am.
Jamaat is an insomniac. Mr. Gaither, it didn't take George Floyd.
Nope.
It didn't take COVID-19. They were courageous enough, Siddiqui Cambone, if he's here, an insomniac. Ralph Brown, Askia Toure, Mel King, Sarah Ann Shaw, Diane Wilkerson, Lakia Baker, insomniacs. That means while most people were sleeping, they could not sleep.
Yep.
That they were the equity voice in the room that raised their hands when nobody wanted to hear the truth. Not even some of you.
Yep.
Because the truth is hard.
Yes.
So before I get into my remarks about Juneteenth, I want you to think about this and be grounded in this truth.
Yep.
So the reality is, I call America the family. And like a family, we got a lot of dark secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Family that don't speak to each other. I know I do. Do y'all got family like that?
Oh, yes.
Dysfunction, secrets, tensions. You can't get together at a funeral or a wedding and it's drama. Because we haven't dealt with the truth. We haven't dealt with the mistreatment, the neglect, the pain, the suffering within our families. America is in the same position. We don't deal with the truth.
Nope.
Because if we knew the truth, it'd be different to show up at work. I need you to hear what I just said. The brother's shaking his head. When you know the truth, it's different to show up at work. When you know the truth, it'll be a little harder to drive by to shoot that cat on the corner. When you know the truth, it's a little harder not to say, I want to own a home, or I want to live healthy. But the problem with America and the problem with white people and our people is we don't know the truth.
Yes.
So here's what I do. I came back from college, I volunteered, I worked with some amazing people like the Abdulhalik family, and many of the activists I just named. I was a young kid, became head of the Million Man March Mobilization Committee in my 20s, 30s. And then a few years ago during COVID, somebody said, Mike, you've been doing this work for a long time. I want you to come and talk about reparations. And I said, well, let me find somebody who does this work on a regular basis, and then, I'll find you someone to do it. I couldn't find anyone to do it, and I decided to pull some slides together. So I pulled together 40 slides on reparations. and I did that presentation. And the way I approached that presentation is I gave American history. So when I say American history, I didn't say black history. American history. Because I acknowledge black history and Carter G. Woodson's effort to create Negro History Week, but the reality is you've been gaslit. Because it's as much their history as it is ours. So here's where I want to start. I came back after that 40 slides, and I decided to do a presentation called Quantum Leap. Anybody remember the TV show Quantum Leap?
Yes.
So for those who don't watch a lot of TV like I did, Quantum Leap, Sam Beckett, the physicist, would jump through time. And he would jump into the body of a person no matter what the situation they were dealing with, and then he had to deal with whatever situation he was. So he'd jump into the 1800s or the early 1900s, a fire, a lynching or whatever. And then he had to deal with the circumstances. Amazing TV show, 1989 and 1993. So I was in college at that time, and I saw an episode called the Justice episode. The Justice episode, Sam Beckett jumps through time, and he ends up in the body of a Ku Klux Klan member. Anybody remember that episode? And throughout the course of the episode, he doesn't know halfway through the TV show why he's there. He's just meeting people, having conversations, and at some point halfway through the show, he finds out what's about to happen. He's about to lynch an African American. It's called the Justice episode. So when I was in college, and I remember we were sitting in a dorm room, and black students at the Black House, and we were talking about if you could quantum leap, where would you go? And my crazy behind, I was like, I'd go to slavery. Right? People were talking about they want to go to Rome and some amazing event. And I was saying I wanted to quantum leap to those points in here. I want to be sitting in the movie theater for Birth of a Nation in 1915 to understand what we call now white racial pornography. I want to be there at the Nat Turner Revolt. Most people don't even know who Nat Turner is. Some people didn't even watch the movie Birth of a Nation, Nate Parker's film. Shame on you if you never watched that film. Because I tell people all the time, name me 5 heroes and sheroes from slavery. But you can name me a lot of American revolutionaries, right? But you can't name 5 men or women who violently or non-violently fought to free themselves from 1619 to 1865. Give me liberty or give me death.
Yeah.
You know that, right? Live free or die. But from 1619 to 1865, most of you would be hard-pressed to name anybody in slavery who fought violently or non-violently to free themselves. You should all feel duped. That means that you've been written out of history. That means they've ignored your courage, your resilience, and you know what happens when you don't know your family history? Then you don't know why you're sick. You don't know why you got that disease. You don't know why you're frustrated or angry or you've been abandoned by family. You don't know it because you don't know your history. So we stand here on Juneteenth. I say to people right now, I'm going to ask you to quantum leap to 1865. Can you all do that for a second? Yeah. That means it's good to be out here. It's whatever, 80 degrees, and we celebrate and we have a good time. But that's not what the founders of Juneteenth would want you to do. Don't just celebrate. We will celebrate, but we need you to reflect. 1865 in Galveston, Texas. So as was said, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, I need you to understand that the economic value of 4 million slaves at the end of the Civil War was $3.1 to $3.6 billion. 19th century, I'm talking modern day terms. I need you to take that number in. $3.1 to $3.6 billion. I'm not talking about sugar. I'm not talking about molasses or trees or cows or cotton. I'm talking about people. $3.1 to $3.6 billion. So no surprise why they didn't want to let us go. We made this nation wealthy. I need you to understand that in Galveston, Texas, when those folks, if you've ever seen pictures of Galveston in the 1800s, beautiful people. The brothers had the dope hats on. The sisters had the beautiful skirts or dresses on. And they were sitting and living and existing within Galveston, Texas. And I'm gonna tell you something we know. The masters did not want to tell them they were free because they knew they were free because the word had already gotten to Texas, not just Galveston, but Texas in general. 250,000 people enslaved in 1865. Now, I'm going to deviate to say this thing. I don't trust not one of y'all to own somebody. I don't care how Christian you are, how much of a good person you are, how kind-hearted you are. I don't trust not one of y'all to own another human being.
Yes.
And imagine, people owned other human beings for 8 generations. I don't think about your own family. I'm talking 8 generations were owned by other people. So when I came back from college and now I'm doing this Quantum Leap presentation, I said to myself, I need to understand why we live the way we do. History started connecting the dots for me. Why are we poor?
Yeah.
How many people know about the Homestead Act and the Southern Homestead Act?
Yeah.
The fact that America's always repositioned other Americans. The New Deal, as I call it, the Raw Deal. The GI Bill. The Homestead Act was basically, they gave you land to move and to settle on property all across this country, particularly in the West. And you got subsidies to do it, but they screened off former slaves from that opportunity. So of course I'm growing up thinking when they say black folks need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They need to stop eating pork. They need to get a job. And you can internalize all. I'm gonna give you a definition of a word I want you to remember. I'm not gonna be able to find it, but I'm gonna give it to you. Gaslighting. How many people know what gaslighting is? Gaslighting is when people put a narrative on you that at some point you start to believe it.
Yep.
You start questioning what you saw, what you heard, what you believe. Now I want you to think about that. I was watching an NBA game this year, and there was a brother playing basketball, and they said, oh, he went to the Robert E. Lee High School. Think about that. A black boy, now man, who went to the Robert E. Lee High School, the man who was famously known for defending slavery. And he was wearing his jacket in high school. That thousands of kids across this country go to Robert E. Lee high schools. Or they serve on Robert E. Lee military bases. Or they go to medical school and they celebrate J. Marion Sims, the father of gynecology, but most of you probably didn't know he became the father of gynecology because he experimented on black women slaves.
Yep.
Because you couldn't touch white women in the 19th century. That was considered unethical, but you had Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy. Look them up. 3 black women you could experiment on. Countless black families that were subjected to medical experimentation. So now I want you to think you're in 1865 and you're in Galveston, Texas. I want you to think about the beautiful clothes. I want you to think about it was an immigrant city. It was a major industrial mecca for Texas and the country. It was on a coastal city. It was a city where they brought in goods and services from across the globe, not just from the United States, not from South America, but from across the globe. People pulled into the docks with their goods to sell. I want you to think about how much wealth was built in Galveston, Texas. One of the wealthiest men in the nation in 1865 was a white wealthy landowner, had I think 8 or 9 plantations. So I want you to think about the fact that in this community, $1 to $3.6 billion net value, it makes perfect sense why they didn't want to tell you were free. They didn't want you to know because you were their wealth. But you know how we do, right? The word gets out. We all go run tell that. We start shouting, I heard that we're free in these other states, but you waiting for the news. So I actually have a theme for today. What are you waiting for? They were waiting for news that they were free. But I want you to ask, as I talk and wind this speech around, I want you to understand and ask the question, whether you're sitting in 1865 or 2024, what are you waiting for? 1865, 250,000 slaves in Texas. Colonel Granger pulls in with his troops. They get the message that you heard today, and all of a sudden they're celebrating, which is why we're celebrating today. It's worthy of a celebration. They need to hear you. Our ancestors need to hear you as they celebrated that day in Galveston, Texas.
Oh, yes.
But here's a nugget you may not have known. Slavery didn't end on that day.
Yep.
So I always ask the question, is Independence Day really 1776? Remember the word gaslighting. How many of you celebrate Independence Day? July 4th. I know I have. When in fact, millions of folks were not free in 1776.
Yep.
So maybe Independence Day is really 1963 with the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, or maybe it's June 19th, 1865 with Juneteenth, or maybe it's December 6th, 1865 when those states that were not in rebellion to the Union, some 500,000 or so slaves were eventually set free with the signing of the 13th Amendment. You didn't even know that, did you? Did you know that that wasn't into slavery, June 19th? That basically the deal that Abraham cut was, hey, if you're not in rebellion to the Union, you can keep your slaves in Missouri, in Kentucky, in Delaware, in Maryland. There were still slaves after today. Did you know in communities across this country, it took years before landowners would even let their slaves leave their land? I want to introduce you to a word called debt peonage. You don't even know what that is. Do you know what it is? I'm gonna tell you why it's important to understand. Here's the hustle of it, right? You're a slave. You just found out you're free. They just told you you can go. I'm your slave owner. I said, well, you know what? Now you owe me for that land you lived on. Now you owe me for that food I gave you. Now you owe me for all the things that I did while you were in bondage to me. And if you try to leave, you're gonna be jailed and you'll be loaned right back to me on this plantation. So you will essentially still be a slave. How many people knew that happened well after slavery?
Oh, yes. It's happening
You
today.
basically were working for free. So when I talk about these issues, I say now, I'm gonna have you quantum leap back forward, right? I can have you walk through Red Summer in 1919. How many people know what Red Summer is? As that great migration started to happen and black folks started moving into northern cities, and soldiers were coming back, black soldiers with guns were coming back from the war. They came back and were treated as second-class citizens and with the indignities of being an African-American now veteran. They came back to communities all across this country and had to fight race wars. Look it up, 1919, Michigan Avenue. Black boy drifts into the whites-only section at Michigan Avenue in the lake. They stone him to death. It leads to days of protests and riots in Michigan, in Chicago. Did you know that story? All across this country, race riots, 1919. So you might know after George Floyd, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, but you don't know about the many other race riots that they kill black citizens, burn black businesses, burn black families, kill black families all across this nation. So there's a reason why we study history. There's a reason why we come here today to talk about Juneteenth. You gotta know your history.
Gotta know your history.
So as I quantum leap you, when we leave 1865, and we'll quantum leap to today. Right now, as we sit here, if you're a black woman, women in general are surviving breast cancer, you don't have that benefit. Black women are not surviving breast cancer. With all the advancements in medical technology, you're not surviving breast cancer like white women are. We were 2 to 3 more times likely to die of COVID. Why? The same reason we were 2 to 3 times more likely to die in the Spanish flu 100 years ago.
Yep.
Just a few decades out of slavery. Because we were unhoused, poverty, unbanked. We didn't have medical access to medical care. We were essential workers in 1918. And we were essential workers in 2020. So that's why we disparately died. And we had comorbidities.
Yep.
People all know that word. I go to barbershops now and everybody in the barbershop is talking like an epidemiologist now. They start talking about FDA approval and I'm like, wow, we come a long way. But the reality is there's a reason why we're sick.
Yes.
I need you to know when I was in the Linden Street housing projects, the Mau Mau's or the Black Panthers would come through and my mother would have me towing my hand in arm and we'd be walking through the projects and they would be like, yo, doctors don't treat us the same. You know those doctors don't give us medication we need. You know they amputate our limbs when there's other courses of treatment. You know that they don't believe you black women when you have a pain.
But God.
Nobody believed those activists on those street corners. They were crazy. They were militant. All of a sudden, Institute of Medicine puts out a report in 2002 called Unequal Treatment.
Yep.
that documents that doctors don't treat black people the same. That means right now, I'm gonna give you a word that I want you to remember, a phrase called the weathering effect. How many people heard of the weathering effect? Good, most of you haven't. I'm gonna give you this definition. Weathering effect, Dr. Geronimus in 1990 wanted to look at women's mortality and morbidity from being pregnant. Because if you could quantum leap back to 1990, black women were dying in pregnancies and their babies were dying. It was a crisis. Then and now. Then and now.
Lord Jesus.
In 1990, they believed that black women's babies were dying because they were having teen babies, that they were too young to have babies. So Dr. Geronimus decided to research it and look at the study, and she got a trial, she did the research on the mothers, and she found out that that was actually not true. That the teen mothers had healthier babies.
Yep.
That their babies were born healthy, that the mothers were born healthy, and the older they got in their 20s and 30s, they were sick. They were dying in their pregnancies then and now. And she called that the weathering effect. That you can get so used to being sick, so used to being mistreated in our medical sector and by the medical professionals, so used to being poor, unhoused, uneducated, unresourced, that you become weathered to it. Those black women became weathered to the trauma, to the circumstances, to the conditions, but their bodies reflected that pain, to racism. So I asked the question as you sit here right now, the little kid from the project, little big head boy from the projects, what are you weathered to?
Yep.
When you walk around in your next family reunion, when you go to your next gathering, when you're here in this park today, when you walk down through Nubian Square, I want you to pay a different attention to everything you see. There's a reason why those brothers and sisters have substance use disorder.
Yes.
Like my sister was addicted to crack
Yes.
most of my childhood. There's a reason why all my uncles were locked up, gone too soon, mostly for non-violent drug offenses. There's a reason why we were poor and we didn't own a home until I bought the first home in the family. There's a reason why most of my aunts
to
and
fight to
uncles were
keep
gone by the time they turned 60s.
Yep.
Cancer, diabetes, lupus, gone too soon. And we got weathered to that. I want you to hear me again. When you get weathered to it, it doesn't even faze you anymore. You become accustomed to it. You start thinking it's normal that you can leave where we're sitting right and standing right now, take a train or a bus to Back Bay Station and live 23 years longer. 23 years longer. You don't live as long here. So when we think about Juneteenth, I bring up and I draw on the ancestors when I say this. They would ask you, what are you waiting for? What are you doing?
What are you
Because the
doing?
reality
Yes.
is we celebrate Juneteenth and we think about reparations to draw it back to reparation. There's a reason why we don't have wealth.
Collective power. That's what we
Of
need.
course, I tell people all the time, and I want you to hear me when I say this, because I need you to hear this. There's attacks on DEI, there's attacks on history in Florida and across this country. We got to fight back on that. I want you to hear what I'm about to tell you. If you believe that all people are talented, how many, raise your hand if you believe all people, no matter what race, gender, what pronoun they are, they're talented people. That's not reflected in our medical schools, our law schools, and our C-suites.
Nope.
There is a little black girl right now, somewhere around this neighborhood or in this park right now, meant to find a cure for cancer.
Yep.
Meant to find a cure for cancer. We will never know her.
Yep. They'll try to kill
You'll
her.
never know her. So if you get cancer, I think 1 out of 2 women will have cancer
Yes.
and 1 out of 3 men. That's terrifying to know, but it's a statistic. Dana-Farber Cancer Institute shared that with me.
Yeah.
That little girl is meant to save your life. But she goes to a level 4 school.
Yep.
She has drive-by shootings in her neighborhood.
Yep.
Her teacher does this self-fulfilling prophecy thing where she doesn't believe she can do that exam or be in that honors course or that STEM program, so she doesn't put her in that program. She may come from a home where there's battles and drama, conflict in the household, so she can't study.
Yep.
She may not have the nutrition and the value, the
Poverty
nutritional
kills.
benefits that
Access
she needs in order to
matters.
perform in the classroom and on that exam. She may be dealing with depression and trauma from her circumstances and she does not get the care she needs. And we all pay for that.
Yes, we do.
So the next time you walk into a meeting and it's only white folks, and particularly only white men,
Yep.
I want you to be as irritated as I am.
Yes.
As irritated as I am, because that means that all that talent that exists in this park, we may never know how beautiful and amazing they were meant to be.
Yep.
So Juneteenth celebration. It's a celebration we get to reflect and we get to act.
Yes.
You are here to reflect, but when the day's over and you've had enough great food and we've heard some great music and you bought some great stuff from all these vendors, now you gotta act. I need you to be unweathered.
Yes. I'm unweathered.
Because all of you are weathered. I'm weathered. But we gotta get unweathered. I need you to be irritated with disparities.
I'm irritated.
I need you to be irritated with the wealth gap.
I am irritated.
I need you to understand that too few black people own a home. I need you to understand that we have higher medical debt, higher education debt.
Yes.
I need you to understand all these statistics that most of you don't even want to think about.
Yes.
There's a burden that comes with knowledge and
Amen.
consciousness.
Yep.
Jamada. There's a burden that comes with knowledge. I know why we don't want to know.
Yeah.
Because the day you know,
gotta
it's
do
like the weight
something.
of the world is on you.
Yes.
Now you show up differently. Every time I walk through Nubian Square and I see that mother and that child, and I'm saying that mother needs services or that father needs services, it hurts me.
Yes.
When I go to Mass and Cass and I see the addiction on that street corner, I get it now. I say those brothers and sisters need care.
Yes.
They need services. When I walk into a classroom and they're not getting a quality education, I'm saying we're losing talent in this room.
Yes.
But when you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yep. When you know it,
You can't unsee it. Now it's in your spirit. Now you show up differently. Now you got to be the skunk at the party.
Correct.
Anybody been a skunk at the party?
Oh yes. Gladly
You raise
so.
your hand and say, well, that's not equity.
Yep.
Wait a minute, that's not justice. So I'm going to say this. There's a phrase in the NAACP. I'm former president of NAACP on the national board since 2014. An organization born out of a race riot, 1908, the Springfield race riot. I need you to know one of the phrases we have in the NAACP. We say courage will not skip this generation.
Yep.
I don't know about y'all, but I get really proud when I see these young people climbing poles, tearing down flags, and tearing down monuments of J. Marion Sims in Central Park,
Yep.
or challenging institutions and systems in a way that we didn't even do.
Yep.
So courage is not skipping this generation. I encourage you as we celebrate Juneteenth, in the spirit of those families, those 250,000 folks who found out they were free, we still got work to do. Thank you.
Yes. Got work to do.
You know, you got away from me by going.